Welcome to the Get Real Movies podcast. This is episode 3. My name is Daniel Chadwick-Shubat. I am your host, and today I am honored, privileged even, to be joined by my co-host for the first time in years. Welcome, Mason.
The privilege is mine, Daniel. Good to be here on the amazing Get Real Movies podcast. I recommend this podcast to anyone with ears. So happy to be on. Thanks for having me.
I know. Well, I think from the first episode, I was excited for this episode to finally be talking with you again. For people who haven't listened to us years ago, and that's probably most of you, we actually started this podcast together back in 2016. We met as internet friends, and we've actually developed into actual real life friends as well. But now we're back, having met each other. We're like we have such a good chemistry that we should start this again.
Oh yeah, and I've seen you in person, so I know you're flesh and blood, not just like AI, Chat GPT coming after me.
Well, exactly. And that's a real thing nowadays. So it could happen, but luckily we met before that, really exploded. So
There you go. And now it's nothing but smooth sailing from here on out. Now our podcast career is zooming.
it's zooming, exactly. So Mason, for people who don't know, who didn't listen to the intro episode, Mason's going to be joining once a month, maybe more, depending on who we talk to. And we're going to be talking about one movie that we pick each month. So this month, it's actually I picked the movie. It's Bob Marley, One Love. So we're going to be reviewing that a bit later on. And then next month, we're going to do a movie of Mason's choosing. So obviously, that's a little anticipation. Mason, still has to decide. So we'll see what we'll be reviewing.
Oh yeah, I'll make it something insane or easy. I don't know. I'll make it whatever I want it to be.
Exactly. You do what you want. This is your month. Well, not this month, but next month is your month. So that's totally fine.
There we go. See, everybody wins, or more importantly, I win. That's all that matters.
Exactly. Well, I think as long as everybody wins, I'd rather everybody wins than just you win, but it is your choice, so it doesn't really matter. So we're actually going to first start talking about what we've been watching this week. So Mason, I first want to ask you, what are some of the films you've been watching this week? Would you recommend them? Wouldn't you just entertain us, please?
Sure. So I've actually been going on a bit of a an old movie lineup recently. I've been trying to get through like the old classics to make sure I can call myself a real movie pro by at least having that in my film history. So I recently watched Gone with the Wind, which it's 4 hours long, but it doesn't feel like it. It actually keeps up the pace pretty well. But you have to really be dedicated, and you also have to be able to overlook a lot of forgive the term whitewashing of the history. It's definitely very favorable towards like the antebellum South first, and kind of overlooks the racial disparities of the time. I also recently watched a Roman Holiday, Audrey Hepburn's like first main starring role. And this movie is like La La Land before La La Land. Like it's all fun and games. It's all like so much cuteness, and then the end is just absolutely devastating. And I loved every bit of it. So I highly recommend both. I loved each and every moment, and hope that we can connect on that. But what about you, Daniel? I want to hear what the master's been watching.
Well, I just as a comment, Roman Holiday is one of my favorites for sure, so I highly recommend it as well. I still haven't watched Gone with the Wind, so I guess it's gonna have to be on my list with a critical eye covering
Yes,
my actual eye.
and you just gotta fall in love with Clark Gable.
Well, that's not hard. Those Hollywood stars in the olden days, they weren't bad looking people, that's for sure. Even if they are dead now and 6 feet under.
That does lessen their attractiveness a little bit. Yes.
Just a tiny bit. Yeah. This week I kind of did a bit of a Valentine's week. It is my first Valentine's not single in a while, so I was watching some romantic comedies and some other things like that. I did watch Notting Hill, rewatched it. It is to this day one of my favorite romantic comedies of all time. I don't think you can beat Hugh Grant in terms of aloofness and cuteness at the same time, and it's just a very heartwarming kind of feel good film. Julia Roberts is, well, Julia Roberts.
Right.
There's not really a word that can describe her when it comes to being just the biggest movie star pretty much of that time. And just a really fun movie. Another one I watched that is kind of a weird one where I liked it, but I'm not sure why, was the new movie that just came out on Prime called Upgraded. Um, Maybe I related to it because I recently got upgraded to first class on my flight back from England, where I was for work over Christmas, because I actually enjoyed it. I had a fun time with it, it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. I think it maybe helps that Marissa Tomei is in it and she has a French accent, or what is an attempt at a French accent. I'm still not sure what it is, but she's really great in that, and it's sort of giving the Devil Wears Prada vibes, just a little bit more for this generation. So I did enjoy that as well. Wouldn't pay money to see it at the theater, but it was a pleasant surprise on Prime, so I can't complain. We kind of did opposite things. You did the classics, I did the turn off your brain, have no cognitive functions going on while I watch a film. So,
Hey, that's okay. And I haven't seen either of those, and now that you've given me these recommendations, now I got to check them out. Now I got to add them to the list. So we'll see how it goes.
well, Notting Hill especially, I highly recommend watching that with the significant other. It's definitely a good around Valentine's Day movie, and
Yeah.
honestly, you can watch it at any time. So,
See, my only problem with that is Hugh Grant. Like Hugh Grant is such like he's such a bumbling guy on screen that I cringe watching him trip over himself. He does it on purpose, of course. That's his shtick. But I'm just like, oh, dude, just get out a sentence without like stumbling, please.
well, he's changed it a bit recently because in The Gentleman, he was just a suave sort of Cockney man, but he was suave instead of bumbling. So, we can all change, Mason. I did want to ask you also, we've talked about what we've been watching. What's something you're looking forward to? Maybe a trailer that came out in the last few weeks, or something that is just on your horizon that you want people to know about?
I cannot fully express how excited I am to see Monkey Man. That trailer just came out. Actually, a relatively long trailer given the how much is put in there, but holy shit, does this thing slap! Like just the music, the action. Dev Patel, you've got Jordan Peele producing it, and who would have guessed that Jordan Peele would be like one of the leading creative minds in film today? Like it's just insane what he's built, but I'm more excited to see what Dev Patel does both in front of and behind the camera. The action, it just looks so good. The camera work looks so precise. I cannot wait to see what he does. Kind of like John Wick before he was John Wick, and also set in India, which is not like a real film setting that we get a lot of screen time with these days. So it's cool to see that perspective. So I'm extremely excited for that. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I do want to say about Monkey Man, I'm quite excited about that as well, and it'll be nice to see India presented through a different lens, maybe than some of the other action movies that have been set there recently. I believe that parts of Extraction were set there, or at least filmed there, and they don't make it look like a very nice country. So I
Yeah,
hope they kind of show some of the intricacies and the culture as well throughout the film. So that will be really, really cool to see, and I can't wait for it either. In terms of myself. I saw this trailer shortly after the Super Bowl because there was a little clip on during the astronomically boring Super Bowl that was the Kansas
what?
City Chiefs versus the San Francisco 49ers
Oh
for the
man, that's
first
another
like
podcast.
well for the first three quarters at least, and then we all knew what was going to happen and it happened. But anyways,
Wow,
we don't have to
man.
get into a sports
Shots
debate here.
fired.
If there's Kansas City Chiefs fans here, stop complaining. You've won three Super Bowls already. Okay, just you've been
Sheesh.
spoilt enough.
Somebody called the wambulance.
You're right. You're right. I'll move on swiftly. But anyways, I saw this little clip during the Super Bowl. I was like, okay, this interests me. I'm excited. It's Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I love the trailer. I love that they're doing something new with it because I think it's a series that really kind of showed what you can do with existing material without completely ripping it off or remaking it. They did such a fresh new thing with that whole Planet of the Apes series. Rise was solid. Dawn was incredible, and War was really good as well. I really enjoyed War for the Planet of the Apes. So
War was
I'm
amazing,
excited to
yeah.
see. Yeah, I'm excited to see how they develop it further. A couple hundred years down the line, it looks like a new premise with a new creative mind behind it, and as well as new actors. So hopefully, there's some up and coming actors coming out of that as well. I'm gonna miss seeing Andy Serkis as Caesar. He's someone that I just hold in the highest regard when it comes to acting and creativeness. He's just a phenomenal artist, but I'm excited to see what they do next with it.
I'm excited too. I think it's Wado Workshop behind the visual effects, but whoever's behind it, the original trilogy visual effects were just out of this world, so well produced, and it looks like they're keeping that high bar in this sequel. I am I mean, there's no way around it. I am disappointed that Andy Serkis won't be in this one, but I mean, spoiler alert for a 10-year-old movie. His character passed away, so there's no real feasible way to bring him back except as a different character. That being said, I'm excited for the cast, especially the villain is an actor that I've seen in a couple of different productions, and he's done a great job. So it'll be interesting to see how they carry on the story, like you said, a couple hundred years past the original trilogy. But yeah, absolutely looks like a fantastic blockbuster. I'm excited to see what they do with the franchise moving forward.
For sure. And I did want to call back on something you said before. I kind of forgot about it for a minute, but you were talking about how it was surprising. You couldn't have seen coming that Jordan Peele would have been one of the biggest creative visions, in Hollywood today. And I was kind of thinking about it on my drive back today before we did the podcast about how much the film landscape has changed. Since we first started recording, but as well as the podcasting landscape, because it's become a lot easier to record a podcast than when we had to do it back in 2016. We had to use a bunch of apps and a bunch of different things where now we can do it on one platform. So I think one of the questions I wanted to ask you before we get into the film review is, what do you think has been the biggest change that you've liked and the biggest change that you haven't liked when it's come to film in 2016 when we started to film now in 2024?
The biggest change that I've liked in film has been the accessibility. It used to be that to make a film that could blow up and actually get a lot of traction, you had to have millions of dollars, like massive production companies, a lot of interested parties. Of course, like you still need to, but we're seeing a lot more success in the indie scene these days. A24 is completely blown up because that's their exact strategy. They purposefully keep the budgets low and force these creatives to work within that realm. And so we see so much imagination with that, like everything everywhere all at once that just blew the Oscars out of the water last year, and rightfully so, was made with a very small team and and was an absolutely phenomenal film. So I'm really excited to see how that bar to entry has kind of been lowered, and how it's obviously paying off. Like it's showing how well you can do when you're not like so guided by money and business. Obviously, these films have to make money either way. It's just great to see how accessible it's become. That being said, in terms of the other side, the side that I don't like in terms of how film has evolved is kind of the other side of the coin in terms of money. Like these massive films, it's become a pretty easy target to go after Marvel films these days, and I don't necessarily believe that's fair. I feel like it's kind of like an easy bandwagon to get on. There are still good creative voices in that space, but for a lot of these franchises, like Disney, for instance, Disney has just been taking L after L because it refuses to innovate. It just keeps making live action versions of what they've been making. Marvel's been doing something similar with a lot of its films, where it keeps using the same formula to generate money rather than push the envelope, give new directors and new voices and new actors like a place to stand up and rise. Like no, like Chris Pratt was that tubby guy from Parks and Rec before Marvel. Now he's one of the world's biggest stars. Like that was a massive risk that paid off greatly. They're not taking those risks anymore. And so it's been a problem that somehow with the more money put into these projects, the less risky, innovative, and like the less the movies seem to impress. It's really bizarre. It's like the less effort is put in, the more resources that a movie has. So I'm not loving that. Like I understand that when you have millions of dollars behind something, you need to be able to show, like to be able to pay that off, be able to show some sort of return for it, and so you want to stick with something safe. But that's really not working for these companies, and I'm really hoping that they eventually get wise and say, hey, like it or not, we're gonna have to do something new, otherwise we're just gonna go into the dirt here.
Well, and I think it's really interesting that you bring that up, because one of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of these creators who are sort of attached at the hip now with these big companies, Taika Waititi comes to mind, James Gunn, people like that, they seem to be in a creative box now where Taika, I think Thor Ragnarok was just astounding. I loved Hunt for the Wilder People as well. And then Jojo Rabbit. There were just some really
Jojo
good
Rabbit, yeah.
films that he was pumping out. But it seems now, just like Thor: Love and Thunder, and even Next Goal Wins to an extent, they're just the same thing that he's made before and before. So after a while, and it's the same thing with James Gunn. Did I like the Suicide Squad quite a bit? But was it something that I hadn't seen from him before? Not at all. It was something that I've seen multiple times. It was just a bit more R-rated. So I think that it's also a danger to some of these creatives where they kind of lose the thing that made them great, which was sometimes it's the smaller scale that really forces you to create things and think outside of the box, as you mentioned with A24. So I think those were some really good points, and it was just something that I kind of thought of on the fly, so I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, no, I halfway agree with you. Like James Gunn, I kind of disagree with you because like yeah, Suicide Squad was you had seen it from him before, but it's still a good film. And I do have hope for comic book movies that he's taken the helm of DC. Like I am extremely excited for that. I think he's an excellent creative mind, and I'm looking forward to what he does with that. But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, you're right. I sometimes I'm a little bit cynical when it comes to these superhero films these days, but I
Yeah.
am hoping to be surprised and I'm open to it as well. So I agree. We should be more positive in our thinking.
Hey, you never know. Time will prove one of us right. Being cynical is not necessarily the wrong way to think about these things.
Exactly. We'll come back to this episode one of those days.
Yeah. Be like, see, I was right. You take a shot.
Yes, take I like that. Take a shot of what's your least favorite alcohol?
Just like the my least favorite. Oh God. Tequila probably. Jeez.
Okay. So tequila for you and lemon absolute vodka for me.
Daniel, that sounds like a terrible idea, and I'm all here for it. Like I'll torture myself for the benefit of the show for showmanship's sake.
Just one shot, just a little bit of that bad taste in your mouth to realize that you should be better at your opinions from now on. But again, that's years down the line. We don't know how long that's going to be until we start seeing good superhero movies again. So
Fair enough. Well, we'll see. Time will prove one of us right. We'll see what happens.
indeed, indeed. And now we're moving on to our movie review. We're going to be talking about the movie Bob Marley One Love. It came out on Valentine's Day. It wasn't the most romantic movie I've ever seen in my life, but I just want to let people know a little bit about it. It is about a small time period in Bob Marley's life, from the late '70s until the early '80s, really the end of his life. And it talks about all the specific events that happened that really led up to why we know him as Bob Marley and the one love man and the really peaceful man that people know him as. So I got to see it on Friday, and I just have to say before we get into the review that I was really impressed with Kingsley Ben-Adir. I thought he did a great job, and him as Bob Marley was not something I expected and not something I really saw coming before the trailer came out. But now that I've seen the film, it's definitely something I really understand and understand why Bob Marley's kid said that there was no one else they looked at after they saw Kingsley. So, but it's directed by Reinaldo Marcus Green. It's written by Terrence Winter, who's of Scorsese fame, and Paramount released it here in the U.S. and Canada. So, before we get into the review, I just want to ask, I guess, some of your initial thoughts, Mason, as well. What were some of your initial thoughts going into the film and coming out of it?
So I am not a student of Bob Marley. Like I appreciate his music. I like his music, but I haven't ever dived into the backstory of his life. I knew that he was big in unifying the people of Jamaica, like back when there was a lot of civil unrest. But that was about the majority of what I knew. Going into this, I I say that to kind of tell you I went in with a bit of a blank slate. Going into this, I was surprised at how, in my opinion, unfocused it was. I thought that moments that should have been like climaxes were glossed over, and pieces that really should have been glossed over were made into these much bigger elements. So it was interesting. I'm glad I went so that I could educate myself more on this like legendary figure. But in terms of filmmaking, I was not personally impressed.
Okay. Yeah, and I find it quite interesting as well because I think we are both people who didn't know a lot about Bob Marley going into this film. Obviously, the premise of this podcast in general is to talk to people whose stories have been featured in true story films. And from what I understand, the Marleys were quite heavily involved in the making of this film. So I think it's quite true to what actually happened. So it was definitely an interesting history lesson. I think there were some real positives out of it. It really made me want to listen to his music, and that's something that Mason and I chatted about a lot. Is that's how I judge when it comes to musical biographical films, is after I'm done the film, do I want to listen to their music? Do I want to learn a bit more about them? And this movie definitely did that. I would definitely agree that it had a tough time figuring out what type of film it was. It had some interesting time jumps, some interesting allegories that you weren't really sure what they meant and what they were trying to allude to. And that's something that maybe you need to talk to the director or read up a bit more about to find out. But I also think that it's important that the film can be on its own without a person having to read up on it or listen to multiple interviews with the cast or crew about it. So I definitely agree. But in terms of positives for me, because I think that's what we wanted to focus on first, was I love the music. I think it was really well produced. They captured Bob Marley's spirit in a lot of the music in the film and throughout the film. I think Kingsley Benadir, like I said before, was fantastic. I really loved him. I did like Lashana Lynch as well. I think there were a few moments where her accent kind of wavered, but
Yeah,
as someone who won't even attempt to do the Jamaican accent, I can only
good
bow
choice.
down to how well they did. I'm also a huge James Norton fan from some of his earlier stuff in the UK, Grantchester specifically, which is a TV show which he's fantastic in. But I thought it was a really kind of um, low key cast in terms of this movie was about Bob Marley. They wanted to make it about him. And I think it was very respectful in that. So definitely the music would be a big plus for me.
Sure.
Some of the acting as well, and then I mean some of the visuals were really cool. I think some of the colors they kind of brought into it were very psychedelic, maybe in times where they didn't need to be, but I think they did a good job with that.
I agree with you in terms of the best. I believe that the best part of this movie was the music, which is an easy layup because I mean it's Bob Marley music. It's already instant classics, and the actual like on-set production of the music that wasn't already like just Bob Marley overlays was very well produced. And yeah, my top goal for this one is Kingsley Benadir's performance. Absolutely unrecognizable. He completely disappears into the role in the best way possible. The Jamaican accent's completely on point. Even like too much, I would say, almost because I just had trouble understanding him. But that's not his fault. Like he is completely embodying the role. That's just something that I would need to catch up on. But he did a absolutely fantastic job. I would complain about Lashana Lynch's performance. I've seen her in a number of different films, and she has fantastic range. She's a great actress, but here she was, in my opinion, extremely stilted, very like wooden, and like you said, the accent kind of disappeared a couple of times, and also, and this isn't her fault, but she was given the very typical role of like man goes off and does something incredible and amazing, and woman kind of the woman in his life kind of stays home and tells him like, hey, you like don't be so crazy, like you should stay back, like why are you going off to do this dangerous thing. And it's such a tired trope, and it's a tired trope because a lot of times like it's just popularized, but it makes it kind of like eye roll worthy a little bit, which really stinks because she was part of the band, she was with him for a lot of what was going on, she was the mother of a lot of his children, and so like seeing her do all of that and then at the same time be like, oh, why are you going so crazy in the rock star life, just seemed a little bit bizarre. Overall, the production was fine, but the only part that really impressed me was Kingsley's performance. I think that this movie is a great lesson in the strength that an editor and clear direction director can have, because so much of this feels disjointed. At the very beginning of the movie, there's this massive just text wall explaining how Bob Marley became famous and it was a leading artist in Jamaica, and I was like, great, I would like to see that, please. Like, I would like to see how that rise happened. But no, it just starts at one of his most famous concerts, where he came on after being shot. That to me is climax material. Like that is a legendary badass motherfucker thing to do. Being shot and the next day saying, "I need to preach love and happiness. I'm gonna get up on that stage and sing. That the amount of willpower that takes is incredible. But they just shovel it into the beginning of the film. So I'm really torn here because like I want to see this done well, and I know that this cast has the ability, but it just didn't come together for me.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you. Some of the choices that they made in terms of how they made this film were not to my liking either. I think it was a bit weird that they started with one of the most badass moments that we've ever really had with Bob Marley, and I knew there was an assassination attempt on him, but I didn't know that he went and did a concert the day after he had been shot, which is just bonkers to think of, and really is as rock and roll as you can get. And they decided to start the film with that, which was, yeah, you didn't really have a second to get into the film and understand who he was. It was just like, here's who he is, and boom. And I think you can start a movie on a bang, but it needs to be done right. And I didn't really catch up until maybe halfway through the film, which is where I started comprehending and getting more into it. Um, and I think that understanding that history of Bob Marley would have definitely made some entertaining watching and entertaining viewing, but it would have also helped clear up a few things and kind of get us more invested in before we see this crazy moment happen. In terms of, I think the writing as well was a bit lazy at times. I think they obviously they want to do the best thing they can to honor Bob Marley, and I understand that the family was quite involved, but when it comes to writing a film, you need to have professionals writing the film. And I think they had the sort of firepower you want in the screenplay. But from what I could see, there were about 5 or 6 writers involved in total. And when you have that many writers in the writer's room for a film, I think it can kind of make things a bit more clunky and wooden than they should be. So that might have
Yeah.
contributed to what you saw as a wooden performance from Lashana Lynch. I think I agree. She definitely has the range. I think there were moments where she showed what she could do, but it was also, this film is about Bob Marley, so we can't let her, shine too much. And maybe that's some other things behind the scenes as well. In terms of the only other thing that I could really think of that kind of got me a little like bit of an eye roll was also the manager trope. Honestly, I didn't think they needed to involve that story. It didn't really add anything to it. I think everyone who's watched a musical biographical film has seen that trope where the manager steals from the artist and is terrible and is just a shitty person in general.
Yeah, you called me after you saw the film. You're like, "There's no such thing as a good music manager in films." I was like, "Here, nobody except Beach from Bohemian Rhapsody. All the rest of them are evil." Yeah,
Well, exactly, and that's why Bohemian Rhapsody stands out, right? Because it was a really enjoyable film, but it was nice to see at least someone finally being a good manager and looking after his talent properly. It gets a little frustrating, and I think it doesn't need to be in there unless it adds to the story. Like when I think of good good additions to story, I think of maybe Straight Outta Compton with Paul Giamatti playing the manager. I think he added so much to that film. He was really great, and he kind of balanced the scenes where there was a lot going on, and I thought he was fantastic in that. But then you have this where there's just a manager who's kind of on the background and then creates a weird confrontation that comes out of nowhere, and it just
yeah.
feels all a little misplaced.
That was really bizarre. You know, it's funny you bring up Straight Outta Compton. That music manager who was portrayed by Paul Giamatti actually sued the film for damages because it made him look so bad. So I wonder if any of these other music managers are like, "God damn these films for showing us up." But yeah, you're right. Like this guy who's been supposedly in Bob Marley's corner the entire time was later confronted by Marley in a bizarre manner. Like you said, like the family was very much included on the accuracy of this film. Uh, at least I don't know about you. At the beginning of my film, Ziggy Marley makes an appearance talking about how he was on set almost every day, making sure that the film was valid. Which is I love it. Everything about that I love. Um, at the same time, Ziggy was a child when this was happening. I'm sure Bob Marley has plenty of witnesses and people that were around him at his during his life story, and I'm glad that Ziggy was there to make sure it was portrayed as accurately as possible. I don't know how much Ziggy Marley can contribute in terms of his personal experience with his father to make sure that's as accurate as possible. So there are some major some like mood swings of Marley that just kind of go in and out of believability. But I mean, at the end of the day, this is a film about a fantastic reggae star, rock star, who just changed the world, and it just doesn't quite scream that. It really more deals with his personal issues with his family, with a little bit with religion, not so much issues with religion, but just how much religion influenced the message of the song. Like the message is the music, is what they say a lot in the film. And I'm just interested to see what the public's reaction is on this in terms of like how believable of a Marley story is it, even with the family's dedicated involvement in it. How much will other dedicated Marleyists appreciate it?
Well, and I think it's really interesting because what I've learned just talking to some of the people I've interviewed so far in terms of for movies and their lives being made into films, I think there's a real balance. And I think that as much as I think a lot of people appreciated maybe having Ziggy Marley there, it's also you need to find a balance of making a film that is about this person and honors this person, whilst also not having to be 100,000% accurate, not having to do every little single thing right. Because sometimes you have to make choices that serve the film, but might not be based completely in fact.
True.
One of the episodes that's actually coming after this one, they talk about a specific scene and how in the movie it's presented in one way that actually makes it so much more exciting and so much more um just better to be it's so much more Hollywood-esque and it's so close to the truth, but it's not the exact truth. But because of it, the film is better for it. So I think that what I think I would have liked out of this film a lot more is something a lot more small scale, where instead of having to go to thousands of cities and going to all these fancy parties and doing all these inspirational speeches and all these flashbacks, some of my favorite scenes in the film were when Bob was just singing with the band,
Yeah.
was around the table and just trying to riff off each other and or when he was singing for his children. I thought they were really beautiful moments and they kind of encapsulated what Bob was about, which was about peace and love and happiness and freedom and people celebrating their not only their differences but how much they have in common. And I think this the message would have come across so much better and it would have been something that really could have made a difference, because that's something that we really struggle with in the world right now is not only not celebrating how we're the same but celebrating our differences. I love talking to people who have different experiences than me, who have different opinions than me, because it keeps me open, it keeps me wanting to learn, and I don't get put in this box where I can't get out of it. And I
There you go.
think that's really what Bob Marley was about, is that he wanted to bring people together. You didn't have to agree with him on everything, but you just had to be willing to open your heart and open your mind and talk to people about things. And I think this film really could have profited from that more if it had just been more small scale and about more of what who and what Bob Marley was and what he represented, rather than having to make it this big old grand film that it was.
You know, it's so frustrating too because at the end of this film they show some real life footage of Bob Marley when he was alive and some of the things he did. One of the things he did was merge the country is in the middle of like legitimate civil war, and these two political parties are just going at it. And in real life, Bob Marley brought together the leaders of these two political parties and had them like hold hands above him, and he like held their hands together. And it was such like a beautiful moment. Why would you not include that in your production? I think that again, I really think that this movie shows the importance of like clear writing, clear direction, and clear editing, because so much of this it just feels thrown in or just to look cool. For instance, there's this one scene that is reused. I am not bullshitting, like 5 times. It is the exact same
If
scene
not
of this
more.
kid running from a burning crop of some sort. The scene looks cool. It is a cool visual. It looked cool the first time. It looked okay the second time. By the third time, I'm like, they have not explained this. It makes zero sense. And by the final time, there's a little bit more context given to the scene. It still makes zero sense. Like it's all about how he had he had no idea who his father was. He was bastard born, and his father was a white man of probably from the English military, and he doesn't see his face until the very end. And then he sees his face in the middle of this burning crop, and that's supposed to mean something, question mark. Like it just has no focus. And so I really think that with Kingsley's excellent performance, some better, more focused writing and editing, this could have been something special. Because like this director, Ronaldo Marcus Green, he made King Richard a couple of years ago, which won Will Smith his Oscar, I believe, and that's a fantastic film. Everybody in this cast has range, has the ability. Everybody in the production has the ability. Like you said, like the writer is from Scorsese fame, easily provable talent that has the reputation to go with it. But the pieces just didn't come together. To make a weird comparison, it reminds me a lot of the Assassin's Creed movie. I was so excited for that because it had such great talent behind it, including the director, including the cast, and that movie was an absolute shit show. Not saying that this movie was a shit show, it had everything working for it. It had all the pieces. The puzzle just wasn't there.
Yeah, I was missing a few pieces, I think, and like you said, I honestly didn't know that the director was of King Richard fame, so that kind of gives you a different perspective as well. I just think that they had, like you said, they had what they needed to make a really good film, and I definitely think this would have been something that the Oscars would have loved. But it is a bit of a I don't know, a bit of a metaphorical mess, sadly,
Yeah,
and it just doesn't put those pieces that it had together, sadly. And like I said, this could have been a really small scale film. It could have been made for probably half the budget and been quite a bit better. So as much as I judge musical biographical films on whether they make me want to go listen to the music, and it did that very well, and I think that it really does pay tribute to Bob in terms of his musical talents and things like that. But I don't think it really pays tribute as much as it could have to all the other things he brought to the world and his legacy that he left behind. And it's not something that I would really revisit, unlike maybe some other musical biographical films that I've watched in the past, like Bohemian Rhapsody, like maybe Elvis as well. Which I just think did a better job of really capturing the talent, but also the gift of what this man brought into the world. So
man, you know you fucked up when you've done worse than Elvis. So I mean, not to say that movie was bad, but just like it had a lot of problems.
yeah, it did, but it's something that I would revisit in the future. It's something that if I was, having an Elvis phase, I would definitely revisit. So, in terms of ratings, we decided to skip the metaphorical out of 10 or out of 5 if we're feeling dangerous out of 5 rating. And we decided to do 4 different rating scales, which is run to the theater, go to the theater, wait till it comes out on video on demand, or skip it. So for you, Mason, what would this be out of those 4 ratings?
So I really wanted to start this off by being like all controversial and just saying skip. Like the movie to me is not impressive. I but its saving grace is Kingsley Benedia's performance. I really cannot sing the praise enough of just how well he did. So I will say that this squeaks by for a VOD for me. Like wait till you're home, get comfy, and enjoy the film. It's okay. It's just not what it should be. And I'm really honestly disappointed that such a amazing historical and musical figure couldn't be done more justice.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I'd be maybe a bit more favorable to it than like squeaking by because I still enjoyed the music a lot, and like you said, Kingsley Benadir's performance was fantastic. I really like the choices he's been making as of late since he skipped Bridgerton season 2. I never got into Bridgerton, but I have a lot of respect for someone who skips a lot of money to make different creative choices. Like you got to give him kudos to that, and I think he made a good creative choice here. Like you said, it just didn't come together the way it was supposed to be, sadly. So I think this is something that, yeah, when it comes out on demand and it's on one of the streaming services, it's definitely one you can put on and like Mason said, get in your comfy clothes and just enjoy some of the music and the performances. So definitely would agree with you there, sir.
So that's our first in the bucket. We've got our reviews in. Now it's time for the public to tell us if we're right or crazy.
Yes, I'd love to hear your feedback. Obviously, you can leave any feedback on any of our socials at Get Real Movies, real spelled with a double E. Before we do end this inaugural co-host and host episode together, I do want to tell people we have a little contest for you. So the lovely
Ooh,
folks at Vortex Media have given me a few Apple TV codes. Can't complain about that to give away to
thank
all
you,
of you.
Vortex Media.
Thank you, Vortex Media. Very, very nice. What we're going to be giving away is a couple copies on Apple TV to the movie The Integrity of Joseph Chambers. It stars a phenomenal cast. Clayton Crawford from Lethal Weapon fame, who I really, really love. Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who most of us love, and Jordana Brewster as well. It's got a really great cast, small scale. It's about insurance salesman during the apocalypse. Goes on a solo hunting experiment only to face a traumatic incident. So a little bit of excitement, a little bit of a thriller, a little bit of a drama. I've only heard good things so far about it, and it's something that I'm excited to watch. So we're giving away a couple codes. So yeah, to enter that contest, all you're gonna have to do is go on one of our social medias: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at Real Movies, GetRealMovies, and tell us what you liked about this episode, and then just leave your name and your email, and whoever wins, we will send you a message and we'll send you that code on your email. So thank you very much again to Vortex Media for giving us those, and our next episode will have another contest as well that I'm quite excited about. So before we end the episode, I'm going to just give you a little sneak peek of the next episode where we will be interviewing the rookie Jim Morris.
And so we do all the red carpet stuff and they take pictures and we're holding the trophy they gave us. And when we get done, they're sending him and his date to one party and they're sending Sean and I to another party. And as we're leaving, he's going one direction, I'm going the other. He calls me back and I walk up to him and I go, "Yeah, Dennis." He goes, "I want you to know you've helped turn my career around." And he hugged me. And that's probably one of the biggest kudos I've ever got in my life. And why did we pick him? I don't know why Disney picked him, but I'll tell you what, the day he signed his contract, I went over to his house in Brentwood and I'm playing catch with Dennis Quaid in his front yard. And you got the dog running around. Jack comes in. I mean, it was just surreal. And he goes, "What do you want out of this?" And I was kind of telling him what the things I wanted. And he goes, "I see it the same way."
So there's the little snippet of the episode. I had a really great conversation with Jim. I'm really excited for you to listen to that, and that will be coming out on March 1st. Mason, before I let you go, I just want to say I really enjoyed chatting with you again. This has been a long time coming, and I'm just very excited that we can finally do this, having met multiple times. I hope that we have many, many more good film reviews on the horizon together. But for now, I'll let you end this episode for us, good sir.
Daniel, it's been an absolute pleasure to be on. Thanks so much for having me back on the Get Real Movies podcast. It has been my absolute pleasure. To everyone listening, thanks so much for tuning in. Hope to have you here at the next one. And until next time, Daniel, it's been great seeing you. I've been Mason, and we will see you at the next Get Real Movies podcast.